All
Okay,
right.
we're good. Okay, great. Before we start, I would just ask everyone to, if you're not speaking, mute your your audio so that we don't have disruption if you're moving papers and stuff. It's distracting. Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to we are June 10th, 2020 regular meeting of the Board of Selectmen. We're meeting by WebEx teleconferencing in accordance with Governor Ned Lamont's Executive Order 7B, Section I or Section 1. Is it 1?
Yes.
Suspends the open meeting requirements of in-person participation, audio and video of this regular meeting. The meeting is being simultaneously televised live on WGA-TV Channel 79 and YouTube at WGA-TV 79 in order to allow the public to view and listen to our meeting. I will now call the roll of the Board of Selectmen and staff attendees. Please respond as I call your name. Deputy First Selectman Mika Cardozo.
Here.
Joseph Crisco.
Here.
Joseph Dye.
Here.
Beth Heller is here. Dwight Rowland.
Here.
And Sandy Stein.
Here.
Administrative Officer, Director of Finance, Tony Genovese. Tony, you're here? I see you. Okay, I didn't hear anything. Betsy Yagla, Assistant Administrative Officer.
Here.
Town Council Jerry Weiner.
Here.
And Clerk Gerald Shaw.
Here.
And Media Specialist Pua Ford. We know she's here. Thank you very much. Item 1 on the agenda is the First Selectman's report. We have all been touched by the recent atrocities we have seen on news reports and the protests that have erupted across the country in response to racism and injustice and the killing of George Floyd at the hands of the police. There is no place for racism in our town or our country. As citizens of this great land, we must find ways to unite and speak out against hatred of any kind. Recently, Police Chief Cappiello issued a press release that I will share an excerpt with you and our listening audience. The full statement can be found on our town website. Quote, myself, First Selectman Beth Heller, and the dedicated men and women of the Woodbridge Police Department stand together with law enforcement officers throughout our state and across the country as we continue to serve with fairness, respect, impartiality, accountability, in accordance with the core fundamentals and values of the oath of office, which we have sworn to uphold. Any performance less than that is unacceptable, and a robust partnership between law enforcement, elected officials, and community members remains key to addressing concerns that arise and successfully moving forward, end quote. Several residents have come forward interested in planning some kind of peaceful vigil or a walk. I have encouraged them to coordinate with our police department and our recreation department. I believe that there may be an event scheduled for this weekend, if indeed I believe will be posted on Facebook. Many others have reached out to my office with a myriad of issues related to the pandemic and the town's continued response. I have tried to respond to all emails and phone calls. As of this past Monday, June 8th, all full-time staff began working on site. However, we still have not opened the doors to the public. All town services will continue to at this time be done virtually as before, which has continued to work out well, thanks to all of our continued committed, dedicated employees. At this time, as above, town buildings, as I said, remain closed, and our playgrounds, athletic fields, and the dog park also remain closed. The transfer station is open for mask-wearing members of the public, and animal control is available by appointment. Our tennis courts and pickleball courts are now open only by appointment by contacting the recreation department. Some boards and commissions have held virtual meetings over the course of the past few months, and a few others have now begun to do so. As a reminder, all public meetings are listed on the town calendar, and the meeting agendas are posted on the town website in the Agenda Center. The meeting agenda will specify if the public can participate via WebEx, and if so, how. It will also specify the meeting, which will be brought, that the meeting, it will also specify if the meeting will be broadcast on Channel 79 or YouTube. Some of them are not. I have also asked our tax collector, Pat Crisco, to give me a brief summary on the process this year for tax collection. So I'm going to let the board know and the listening audience know how this will be happening. Pat wrote to me that she would encourage residents to mail their checks with the proper bills if possible. If not, Pat and Linda in the tax office will be available to provide access for those residents who wish to pay in person. The tax office will be available on the front porch of Town Hall at the window to the right of the main doors, and the window will be staffed Monday through Friday, beginning July 1st, from 9 a.m. to 12 noon and from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. So that's a very nice thing they're doing. We continue to stay in constant contact with the resident through weekly e-news blasts, our monthly newsletter, social media posts, our town website, and daily posts to our town Facebook page. I have continued to remind folks to please try to stay home as much as possible and only venture out when necessary. And also by doing so, we are all showing respect for each other and also protecting our neighbors and, of course, saving lives. Town residents in need of a cloth mask may call the Human Services Department at 203-389-3430 or 203-389-3429 to request masks for members of their household. Masks are in stock now. This evening, we will continue to discuss the Amity Woodbridge Historical Society and Town of Woodbridge agreement. As it is an agreement which is not yet finalized, that discussion will be in executive session. As I have said in the past, I'm glad that we are close to an agreement, and I believe that our relationship with the Historical Society will be better and stronger thanks to the new agreement and the new ad hoc oversight committee. Once the agreement is in place, we as a board will develop the charge for the oversight committee. In addition to the Darling House Oversight Committee, as I discussed with you briefly before the pandemic, if you remember, who remembers, I have now begun to create an ad hoc group which will have the name the 2030 Task Force. Once I create the membership, I will develop a specific charge for the group to consider on how to grow and diversify our grand list. In fact, I announced the idea at the March Board of Selectmen meeting just days before we closed town buildings due to COVID-19. I should be able to announce membership of that committee at our next meeting. The committee will take a big picture look at the changes the town should consider in order to have a more robust and diverse grand list by 2030. I won't be here. I mean, I won't be on the, I don't know, it's 10 years away. I'm anticipating things such as creating a tax incentive program for businesses looking to build or expand, and perhaps beautifying the business district, and many more ideas I probably haven't thought of. We need to consider bold ideas to make Woodbridge an attractive place for residents and businesses, and also to think about how the town can react to the pandemic and the effect it's having on our local businesses and the real estate market. Thank you, and that is my report. And with that, I will go to item 2, the Woodbridge Board of Education Superintendent Robert Gilbert, and I see Bob is here. Welcome, Bob.
Hi, Beth. How are you? Good to see you and good to see everybody. And I hope everybody's doing well and your families as well. I just came from a meeting of our community and diversity committee that we had from the school that we formed a few years ago. And I just from a heartfelt way, we've really grieved what's happened across the nation. And our committee, which has been working during the last few years, has now really stepped up their efforts and their passion around trying to promote equity and to defeat the bias that has gone on. And so they are working. It's a group of parents, teachers, and administrators who come together, and they'll actually be presenting a little bit to the Board of Education on Monday at our board meeting about their efforts to date and looking to the future. So I just got in from that a few minutes ago, and it's good to join all of you. So I'll just mention, as you know, that it's been a very unusual time for education and educators and students and families. Very demanding and busy, but amazingly enough, we actually are almost at the final day of school. It was hard to believe that was ever going to happen when we started distance learning back on March 17th or whenever we started that. But Monday is the last day of school, and for our Beecher graduating 6th graders, we can't have the usual ceremony that we usually hold in the auditorium of the high school, but we have prepared a graduation video that each family will be able to have and use to celebrate a special day with their 6th grader. And I'd like to also make mention publicly that we thank our PTO and the executive board of the PTO for their plans to help get graduation deliveries of various items to each of the 6th grade homes. So congratulations, 6th graders. Thank you very much, PTO, for your help on that. I've said it before last month, but I'll just say that, our students are the best. They should be commended for their work, their responsibility, their independence. And of course, kids missed being with each other, but they somehow have made it through this particular strange time that we've been in. I do want to again thank the PTO for one more item, and that is that we had an amazing and very successful and very heartfelt Car Wave Parade last month. I know that actually some of you in this meeting actually were part of that. I know Beth came through in her car, was one of the first cars in line. And I'm really grateful to the police department, the fire department, and first responders who were helping in the celebration by driving the various vehicles through and making a big to-do about it. It was a great time for kids to see their teachers and teachers to see their students. And also was a way for the PTO to organize a little thank you to the teachers, a teacher appreciation, if you will, kind of an event. So it was a great way to make connections in a way that you didn't have to be on a screen for it. I also want to say publicly, again, we cannot thank our parents enough for the way they jumped in and worked at home with their children, juggling their own work responsibilities, and they did an amazing job. So parents, all of you who are out there listening, I want to thank you again from the bottom of our hearts. We know that your lives were turned upside down. And then again, when you had to become your child's second teacher or perhaps first teacher during all of this. And again, I need to publicly say thank you to all of our staff members, whether it's our teachers who only had a few days to turn this around to make distance learning work, whether it's the teacher assistants, our food service workers, our nursing staff, who are the unsung heroes who do so much to support our kids, and they did so many things remotely, or serving meals, or helping with medical inquiries. I want to thank our office and custodial staff members who have done a great job of holding the fort down. And at some point in the future, we will bring to you a special presentation of what our custodial staff did to really make use of this time to do projects, whether it was maintenance, whether it was beautification, whatever it might have been, to really enhance the facility. We'll make sure to get that to you at some point to show you that. I want to thank all of them, and I also want to thank my incredible administrative team, Lisa, Doreen, Cheryl, and Al, and a very supportive Board of Education. We know we're all very fortunate to live in Woodbridge, a very wonderful town where students and families, for the most part, have great resources, and we were able to make distance learning work. As an update that I want to mention, I mentioned it last month, we have made a decision. It was a difficult decision. Our summer programs, which are many and varied, will not be held on site. We are going to hold them online, whether it's our special education, extended school year programs, or summer scholar, or E-Day, or SEP. It'll be done online to maximize safety for students and staff. I have initiated a superintendent's school opening committee, which is made up of various stakeholders in the organization. This committee is going to help work together as a cohesive unit to guide and to talk, discuss, and make decisions and help the administrative team in the complexities and decisions of reopening school in the fall, which will be not an easy job to do. We thank those people in advance for their help, and I know that from the town side, I've invited as a liaison from the Selectmen and Finance committees. I've asked Sandy Stein to serve as our liaison from the town. So Sandy, thank you very much for your service in advance. I've already mentioned to you our very important Community Diversity Committee, which is meeting on a regular basis. I also want to mention that we have some other committees that are going to be working through the summer. One of those committees is our Board of Education Ad Hoc Security Personnel SRO Committee. This will be a committee that gets together again. We did this process 3 years ago, and we're going to do it again to do an update evaluation of how we handle security in the building, the personnel that we use, which is currently an SRO, and take a look at all of the information out there in the research about how we best serve our students and our school in this particular area of safety. We expect to come back to the Board of Education in the fall with a report, and that will help us to move forward from that point forward. Our enrollment as we end the year is at 861 students, which really kind of kept creeping up during the year, up from 845 when we started and not quite at the 868 we had predicted, but very, very close to that. On a very positive note, we are now running a surplus at the end of the year. This is through the end of May, a surplus of around $186,000. That's up a little bit from last month as we continue to close out encumbrances and to finalize spending or what we're not spending for the year. And I want to thank the leadership of the Board of Finance. I've had a chance to meet with Matt Giglietti and Tony Genovese and myself with Al Pulo, my business manager. Had a chance to meet and discuss the surplus that we have and the partnership that we enjoy and the mutual collaboration, knowing that we're going to be returning a very healthy portion of that surplus back to the town, as well as using a portion with the understanding that we have unexpected COVID-19 needs for next year that were never budgeted in December, to make sure that we can stay a little bit ahead of the curve. So I want to thank Matt and Tony for that conversation, and we're ending the year in a very good position for that, for the town as well as for ourselves. I have not much else to say except I want to just again thank all of our constituents, students, parents, and staff on the teamwork this year, which is a year like no other year we've ever experienced. I wish all of you a happy and safe summer. I hope to see you throughout the summer as meetings may take place, and I'm open for any questions you might have.
Thank you, Bob. Does anybody have any questions? I don't hear any questions. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I got three on the agenda. Now, the public hearing was scheduled for 5:30. Do we have to wait? No one's coming in. No? Jerry, you're muted. Yeah.
Yeah, since no one is, we don't have any comments. Do we have any written comments?
No written comments came in as of 4:30 this afternoon.
Okay, so there's no participation, so I think you can go ahead right now.
Okay, I will begin. In accordance with section 12-632 of the Connecticut General Statutes and the R.E. Van Northern Neighborhood Assistance Act, and parens, I now call this public hearing to order to receive comments on the application received for the 2020 Neighborhood Assistance Act. And there are no comments. In accordance with Governor Lamont's Executive Order 7B, Section 1, parens 3, and parens, the legal notice was published on the town website on May 28, 2020. Is there a motion to waive the reading of the legal notice?
So moved.
So moved.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay. I will call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, it passes unanimously. Now I say again, are there any comments from the public regarding the applications from the Amity Teen Center of $24,980,000 or the Jewish Federation of Greater New Haven, $150,000? No comments. Correct, Jerry?
No comments.
Thank you. Following any public comments, you ask the clerk. I just did that. Okay. I now declare this public hearing closed. Then I will make the following motion. I move to accept the following applications for the 2020 Neighborhood Assistance Act and forward them to the Department of Revenue Services for processing. Amity Teen Center, 10 Selden Street, lighting, HVAC renovations, siding, windows, and entryway at the front of the building in the amount of $24,980. And the Jewish Federation of Greater New Haven, 360 Amity Road, upgrade of JCC's HVAC system in the amount of $150,000. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you. And I'll now call the vote. Is there any discussion from the board, by the way? No? Okay. All in favor? Say-
It's Joe Dye.
Hi,
Joe
Joe.
Dye.
have a procedural statement, I guess, that I'm looking at the legal notice, which notices the public hearing at 5:30. And also says that you, meaning the public, may join the public hearing to give your comments, and it gives the link to be in. It also says you may, whoever's shuffling papers and isn't on mute, please put yourself on mute.
Wait.
Thank you. It also says that you may provide written comments to Mrs. Shaw. So I just bring that up because the decision was we could start early. I don't know that that's in accordance with the legal notice. I also don't know that it makes a difference, but I just thought from that.
But a good point, Joe. I didn't realize legal notice asked that anybody can join the meeting, which I don't think is necessarily true at this point. So based on the governor's executive orders and based on the legal notice for the on the agenda generally, which says that public comments should be emailed, I think we can go ahead at this time and get it over with and finish the public hearing.
Okay, I defer to legal counsel.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. And with that, there was a motion and a second. I will call the question. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay, and then mute yourselves. Oh, wait, any nays? Hearing none, motion passes. Thank you. Everybody remember to mute yourself again. Thank you. Liaison reports. I'm going to start with, I gave my report, Mika Cardozo.
Jeff, I'm not sure if you can hear me or not.
We can.
Okay. I did attend the recreation meeting. It was held online, as all of them have been. The main topics conversation, well, it was started by just reiterating the recreation's mission in regards to safety, wellness, and fun programming and learning. And then the discussions, most of the discussion was around the programming and the fact that most of the programming that folks are familiar with had to be canceled, including the concert for this year. A lot of that had to do with just the logistics that were surrounding being able to put those types of events together, from the health requirements that existed, along with the PPE that was required and the cleaning that was necessary, et cetera. So very difficult decisions were made that the camp programs and other programs would have to be canceled. And they also did review the budget implications of that and reviewed some of what their other budget changes and budget impacts have been. So it was really, the meeting was really around most of that. Fields are still closed. Staffing is still down as far as part-time workers are concerned. There was no public comment, and the meeting was adjourned.
Okay, thank you. Joe Crisco.
Yes, I attended virtually the police commission meeting last evening. And to summarize the report and what have you, financially, their budget is on target. In regards to activity, in regards to things happening in town, the major issue has again been stolen vehicles, and the chief once again appealed to people to please lock their cars. On the report of the chief of police, the COVID-19 operations, masks were handed out and thermometers to businesses, and they're monitoring the situation very, very, very closely. In regards to personnel, they're at full staff because the SROs obviously are back at staff. However, there is a retirement coming up for a dispatcher, Joe Simpkins. which will decrease the crew by one, but they're trying to work out timing so they could, replace that position as soon as possible. In regards to activity, Nika Cardoza's daughter has organized a Black Lives Matters event Saturday, June 13th, 1 to 4. Under the Traffic Authority business, the Police Commission approved for the use of town roads. That enabled the department to go to the state for the use of the state road, I guess Amity Road. And that basically summarizes activity.
Thank you, Joe. Any others? No? Okay, thank you. Joe Dye.
Here, no
Okay,
reports.
okay, thank you. Dwight Rowland.
Okay, I was in the Inland Wetlands Agency meeting on June 3rd. They had a lot of applications that were pending because they missed a meeting or two because of the, I guess because of the computer problems in Town Hall. Most of the applications were for pools, which is no surprise because everybody's been home. So all those were all approved. It was really, Sullivan did it really directly. She went out to a lot of the houses, took a look at it so that, they wouldn't have to hold up the permits to get them installed. Few things, the town of Woodbridge had an application for widening the south side of the driveway to off Beecher Road to the Fitzgerald. Nobody was there from the town to address it, so that'll get heard on July 1st. That's going to be their next meeting. And then the other one, there were two others. One at the high school. I guess there was another a request for Inland Wetlands to act on the new field and athletic complex that the high school is doing, and the agency decided not to act on it at all. And the other thing is on 57 Park Lane, I guess there was an application for a solar farm. And the applicant was online. It looks like they're planning to put a solar array that's going to encompass about 5 to 6 acres on that property. And then I guess the property is close to 8.5, 9 acres in total. And then there's about 3 acres which are not going to be used because there's very heavy slope. They've asked for a study, for if there's any wildlife or anything there that's going to be affected. And apparently there's also a trail that is on Park Lane that they're going to ask to have somebody look at. Okay, but that was approved as well. So other than that, that was it.
Thank you. And Sandy.
Yes, the Library Commission did have a virtual meeting on May 11th, and the real items of business was to promote two internal staff people to other positions. And so Emily Cantor was approved as the full-time Children's Services Assistant. This is to fill a vacancy. And the second position was to approve Kira Edick to be the full-time Adult Services Librarian. And again, this is to fill a current vacancy. And the library is working on some curbside pickup and delivery options. Eric Worthman actually sent out an email today from the library. All the full-time staff have returned. And he hopes to have a plan that he can share soon.
Great.
And that's it.
Thank you, Sandy. I think I've gotten everybody. Okay, we'll move on to item
Beth, speaker.
which is the old
Sorry to
firehouse
interrupt.
update.
Hello?
Oh, sure.
Beth?
Go ahead, Mika. Sorry. Yes,
Hi, I'm sorry. I
That's
did want
okay.
to add, just in regards to the Recreation Commission, one of the things that they also did review was a number of programs that they're still doing online. And Teresa Bonner in particular had put together a number of programs, and it definitely is worth mentioning that it behooves folks, particularly for going into the summer when the kids are out of school, to look online and see the different programs that are available, because they are doing as much as they possibly can to make certain that there are programs that the residents can and the kids can take part in. So thank you. I'm sorry I didn't mention that earlier.
That's okay. Thank you, Mika. That's good. Hopefully folks will hear about it. Thank you. Now on to item 5. I see we have architect David Stein with us. Good evening, David. How are
Yes.
you?
Hi, good to see everybody. Hi, Betsy, I think you were going to be able to give me permission to share my screen. Is that still possible? Okay, excellent.
Done. I
Let
just
me,
made you the presenter.
Okay, excellent. So let me, give me a second and I will do that. So I think at this point you should see, everyone can see my screen. So great. As over the past 3 months, we've been navigating through plenty of these online presentations, and we continue to sharpen our skills on getting ready for it. So technology's working, I appreciate it. So good to see everybody tonight. And I have a slideshow, which I think may have already been shared with you. I've made some slight tweaks as I was getting ready for tonight's presentation. But the reason why I wanted to start with the slide that you see here in front is the bird's eye perspective of the old firehouse. You know, sometimes we want to sort of step back from a project and look at it from a different perspective. And as we all know, as you enter into the town, this building, when it was built in the 1930s, it was specifically positioned in that triangular space, mainly for emergency response. But as we sort of fly down to our street level, that leadership and decision makers in 1930 built a building that was not purely based on storage and operations and practicality. I think we could all agree that the architecture was intentional, and the detail that has been, and the building has been preserved very well over the years with its recent renovations and improvements to the exterior of the building. So with that, just kind of keep that in mind as we're looking at this project. I think although most of our work is interior, the position of a building where this sits in your town is important as you are looking at adaptive reuse. Where does that building sit within as you're trying to reuse it in the context of your neighborhood? So I have a few examples of projects that our firm has completed over the years that are very similar to what we are discussing with you. And I thought it was important to do a comparison. It might give you a visualization of what could be done, but it also gives you a comparison of other projects and also costs that went into those projects. So I'm going to start, and let me just, the next photo that I have here just gives you some, just a splattering of photos of the existing building. I know most of you have already been in the building, and it's probably been a while, but the photo to the top left is of the second floor meeting room. Insulation was added in there to provide a good envelope to the first level because that's being used for storage. But essentially, you know, that hasn't been used for some time. Going in a clockwise manner, bay number 3 is shown to the right. The staircase that is open to bay number 2, and then a photo of bay number 1. Since then, that has been sort of reorganized. This is actually an old photo that we took a few years ago. And I think most of you know we have been involved in this project in some conception since 2011 as this conversation has, has continued. And then fast forward to just this past year, we successfully completed the first phase of the renovation, and we'll talk about that. So, so with that, I'd like to share with you a project that we're very proud of. This was in Manchester, very close to their town, Main Street. It was a building that was built in 1927 as part of the Cheney Brothers factory. That was a factory town, essentially, and they built their fire districts. It's a two-bay building, similar to the two-bay building that was originally built in 1930. You can see by the picture, this is 2009, so it's 11 years ago we started that project, and the building was in, disrepair. The exterior was not maintained very well, and the interior of the building really just housed equipment. So this photo doesn't look much different than the photo that I showed you before. You begin to see somewhat of wood construction. You see that they were using steel in the 1920s and 30s. You see the old wood historic doors. You see brick walls, concrete floor. And yeah, it looks great for storage and serve their function for dry storage. But the town wanted to take that building and adapt it. We all talk about sustainability today, and I think you start with sustainability by renovating the buildings that you already have in place. That's one way of doing it, because there's so much that can still be preserved of a building, even though the fringes are falling apart. The bones of the building remain. So here's an image where we, repaired the wood rot, and we replaced some windows. Historically, we kept most of them. We actually reglazed them and preserved them, and this was within an historic district, so we were sensitive to that. And this became a community center centered around public safety and multi-purpose use, just like what you guys are contemplating using, flexible spaces that allow townspeople to come in and use it for many different recreational and educational spaces. At night, this now looks like a gateway, where before it was just an area where no one really congregated. And in the far view, there's a nice open area where they're able to also use the outdoor space and so forth. Here's the view of what we transformed in that same space. This was the two-bay space. We painted the ceiling and put new ductwork in and some new lighting and carpet on the floor, and left the brick, painted the walls, painted the windows, and this is now a flexible space. They use it for yoga and lecture spaces and art installation and many of those different spaces. Let me go back to just cost on this project, because I think I may have skipped over that on this first slide. So we finished this in 2011. It was approximately a $950, about $1 million project when you add in all the soft costs. It was renovated for $135 a square foot. So kind of keep those numbers, in your head as we're going through, as a project that is similar to yours. In Milford and Woodmont, Borough Hall, down by the water, you can see this bird's eye perspective, again, tucked right into the neighborhood. That was an old career fire station, some volunteer piece that went with it. That was decommissioned a few years ago and went vacant. This was also converted to a similar facility for meeting spaces for the community. In this case, we removed the old garage doors that you see in the image, and we created a patio up front, and those large doors could open up, and they could have gathering spaces inside and out. So those are two examples that I wanted to share that I thought were very similar to our conversation. So let's talk about your project. The existing floor plan that I have in front of you is sort of just a stripped down version. What it shows to the left is bay number 1. That was the original building. Bay number 2 and then number 3 was added in later later throughout the years. In the middle of the building, the core of the building, there's a stairwell, and there's a small stair that ends up to bay number 2. Just recently, we have completed the renovation for some renovations of the project, which we brought in a brand new electric service. We began to look at preparing ourselves for sprinkler systems and also the sanitary, and all of that is sort of prepped in place for a future renovation, whatever that may be. So we wanted to implement that. We did some work to the roofing of bays number 2 and 3. We brought in mechanical units that were set in place, and all that work was completed just in December and closed out at the end of 2019. Here's sort of a closer version of our existing second floor. As I mentioned, that big meeting room really has some interesting architecture because you're within the gambrel roof structure that is there. That staircase that I showed in that original picture is positioned there. And you see a box with an X in the middle. And I'll talk about that, but that's sort of the hub of the building where we are proposing we would put the elevator, and that was where the boiler room sat, actually on the first level. So we have a few views and floor plans that we want to show to you, but essentially what we are proposing is a layout that gives you the flexibility of bringing in programs and easily adapting and changing over to those programs over time. You need that flexibility. And as we sit today, here in June of 2020, municipalities are looking for more space, wider space, so they can meet and social distance. So you have an asset here that is already perfectly fit. Large spaces that were originally intended to fit fire trucks are able to fit some of these flexible spaces. So our plan was to look at bay number 1, the original bay. Right now, the fire department is storing some of their equipment, but that bay really has the character, just like I showed you in that Manchester project, the brick walls, the original roof structure above, and with relatively little work, because we've already set the stage for what you've done in the past, that can be adapted for that same thing. Lectures, art gallery, the Historic Society could use it to hang some of those artifacts. The space is there to be able, I think, to be used, and those doors, as I showed in the bird's eye view, is a wonderful gateway to remove a portion of the pavement in front and put pavers or landscaping. So that becomes a use that can be, it's not just a building that's situated as you enter town, it could be something that could be used. So that's sort of the vision that we begin to see. As you're looking at this building, you also have the surrounding property that without doing a lot, I think you could really transform that building. Bay number 3 is looking for the exercise or fitness room. These little symbols that we're showing can be exercise bike and treadmills, and you could envision all the different equipment that could easily be moved around, and that puzzle could be changed. We could easily bring in the electrical power from above and allow it to be plugged and played relatively easy for that to change over time. And that's the point, that we don't want to lock in all of that infrastructure and only be tied to one particular use. Bay number 2 right now is sort of designed in the same way as a multi-purpose space. And I'll talk about finishes and some other things that go along with it. From a code perspective, things that we would need to do is we do need to add an elevator that would be placed in that center core. The stair number 1 would be reconstructed. the stair number 2 from the second floor would also be constructed. And then we would bring in, create bathrooms for handicap accessibility. Your building already is relatively on grade. We may need to make some smaller, shallow ramps to get it fully handicap accessible, but essentially your building is handicap accessible. So the next 3 plans are just enlarged plans of what we have. You see the elevator that's located in the center, the stair number 2, the bathrooms, and so forth. This shows you potentially some images of what we are thinking of putting flooring down over. And this is all very easy to maintain materials that we are proposing to allow for that flexibility of different equipment, different furniture to come in. And just with paint, I think we could add a really interesting space. The multi-purpose room, through furniture, you can rearrange this in many ways. Our campfire meetings or circle meetings, as I'm showing here in sort of a horseshoe, I think is going to become common practice as opposed to us all being lined up in rows. So you're going to have to think about how you're handling your future meetings moving forward. What I have here is another example of a project that we did. I'm not going to give you a deep dive into that with the exception of just the finishes. This was a project where we converted a former school built also in sort of that post-Depression era time. And we converted that for a senior center and a community center in Middletown. We preserved some nice elements such as the mural that you see there. And we put down these materials, they're resilient flooring. It's not even hardwood, but it gives that look that was there, but allows for ease of maintenance. So with just some very simple construction, you could really change a space. And then the exercise room, you could do some real fun things with just putting up a mural that provides some real good inspirational quotes or something fun to make it more than just a painted wall, rubber flooring, and bring in the equipment, and you have your space. And then moving up to the second floor, that space is open. It can be adapted to a meeting room. It could be adapted to the classroom. Those dormers or little alcoves that are set up there with the doors that you see, chairs and tables could be moved into that and, moved out if that is used as a classroom space during the day, but as a meeting space, maybe for the Boy Scouts or something like that at night. There'd be a restroom. There's a small little kitchenette that would be used. And then there's another smaller meeting room located on that second level. And here's sort of an inspirational picture that we found. I said, you know what, we could start putting something really nice there. Again, use resilient flooring or maybe even refinish the existing floor. And you could see, you could really recreate that space to be very nice. So with that, it obviously cost is, and I'll get to the cost of where does that all want to be, but I want to talk about the second piece of this concept, which is if we are going to move, if an idea is to move fire out of the main bay number 1, then what does that look like and what are the potential costs? So when initially talking about this project, and this was brought up, a storage building just for the firehouse. The firehouse was built and it still needs some more space. I raised my hand and said, I just finished a project that went through this exact same thing. It was deja vu all over again, where we had a building. This is North Stonington, right on Route 2, in which we built, and you see in that white box, we built that just at the end of 2018. It's about a 15,000 square foot pre-engineered building for the North Stonington Volunteer EMS and Fire Department. That project got downsized through their referendum process, and they were short. They went back and held money, and the Selectmen put together money, set money aside, about $250,000 and we were brought back to design for them a 3-bay building, 56 feet by 34 foot deep. Came in at about, we publicly bid it at about $210,000. This is a dry storage building, so it doesn't have a lot of elements, mechanical, electrical. It's very basic. The walls weren't highly insulated, but it stored their light trailer and some other elements that they needed to get undercover, but didn't need to be fully in a temperature-controlled environment. So I thought that was interesting. I always like to draw on comparisons of projects that are recent. It tells us what the market is seeing when you have good comparisons for that. So we then looked at your existing facility. As you know, you have an existing foundation slab that was previously built. That's approximately 42.5 feet by 42.5 feet. And then the proposal to add a 3-bay 45 by 42.5 foot deep onto that to make one facility similar to what we just showed you there. In discussions with the fire department, the equipment that would be stored here would need some more sensitive temperature controls in use. To do that, and it's slightly different than the project before. So I would, and fast forward to 2020, 2021, we are looking at a 3,700 square foot total structure and somewhere around $150 a square foot as the public bid market, bringing us to about $550,000. So to round off with the project cost and where we are, as I mentioned, in July of 2008, we bid the full renovation of the entire building. Not much different than some of the concepts that we're talking now. Program might be different, but the architecture is very similar to what we would need to do. We had 3 bidders, so we did actually have a fairly good, I think we had a 4th and one ended up dropping out, but ultimately we started with 3 bidders. The bid pool was solid. It ranged from $1.3 to $1.8 million. They were all qualified contractors that we are familiar with, and I think the town was familiar with too. Ultimately, it was one of them was the same contractor that ended up doing our phase 2 work, which we completed in 2019, which we, as I mentioned, did HVAC, roofing, and electric service upgrades. That was approximately $500,000 worth of work. So knowing we bid the project in 18 at a range between 1.3 and 1.8, we spent about $500,000 on part of that. It brings us to today a project that I'm showing that is somewhere between $900,000 and $1.3 million, $156 a square foot. So comparing that to Manchester that we showed you, that was 10 years ago, and knowing where we sit with the construction market. Construction in some cases have come to a standstill. Some have obviously continued to move on because it was deemed, essential, but the market is flat. We are not seeing, people are hungry, and that's why I'm not showing a great escalation projected. If this was a 2020, late 2020 or 21 project. Project just overall timeline is approximately 3 months of design. You would need a month and a half to bid the project. And construction, since primarily is internal, is approximately a 6-month project. So with all that, as I've kind of talked for the last 15, 20 minutes, I'll turn it back for any questions because I know I covered a lot. So thank you.
Thank you very much, David. I would open it up to questions.
Just a question, Joe Crisco. Will the front of the building remain the same as it is?
Yes. Yes, I think with the exception of we would contemplate those doors instead of being raised doors, maybe a different type of barn door that would open to allow that to, so people could now congregate inside and outside. Right now, if large equipment is not coming in, I would envision that we could create a nice patio or landscaped area out front and take advantage of that and take advantage of those doors, similar to what I showed in the Woodmont Milford design.
Great.
Thank you. Anyone else?
David, Dwight.
Hi, Dwight.
Hey, how are you? Just a few questions. The costs you're doing are only construction, right? That doesn't include architectural fees, no furniture, fixtures, or anything else. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Thank you for Dwight for pointing that out. I didn't point that out, and sometimes that gets misinterpreted. Right now, we're looking at just the cost of bricks and mortar to do the work. There are
Right.
other costs that get associated, design fees, bonding costs, advertising, all those soft costs that I think most of you are familiar that get brought into this, and contingency, okay, and where that contingency lies on your end. I presented this in this fashion, so we were comparing dollars to dollars of brick and mortar costs and not those ancillary. We could easily work with you on developing that and sharing the total cost, but right now we were just honing in on that. So thank you for pointing that out, Dwight.
No, that's fine. I was just curious because everybody sort of tends to look at that number and they forget about all the other, all the other costs that related. Are we planning to do any exterior work? Like some of the asphalt is really terrible. It's cracked, there's holes, there's whatever. Is that included in this, or this is just building renovation costs, nothing on the exterior?
Yeah, I think because this is the first time presenting the concept of looking sort of beyond the realm of the four walls of the building, that the cost that I'm showing you doesn't represent that. Because I think the next conversation would be, okay, what would you want to do to that space? And then from there, we could tailor a budget around that. Because I think there's many ideas, and you could spend, you could spend your money in very different ways. But right now, the money that I'm presenting really just shows around there. But I do agree that there's really good opportunity to not spend a ton of money, but to make a really quality impact to the front of that building.
And also the back of it too, because the back of it is, because it's pretty ratty in the back with all the asphalt, and it goes up and down and whatever. So. And then
I think that also tends, sorry, Dwight, I was just going to say that is an important piece, because the conversation then bleeds into parking and the use of that and who's able to park there and its connection to the library and to, and to the remainder of the other buildings. That's a conversation that we would have to have, and I agree. Right now, it needs some TLC.
Right. And then the other question I had is, included in your numbers, is this also like a full building, including security, et cetera, that I'm assuming we're going to be putting into this building? This is all inclusive. So, or would we add security later on? Is that part of the soft costs or upgrades or whatever it is?
I'm looking technology being security, technology being computers such as audio video technology, any of these equipment items that you might consider to be operational costs that might be assigned to a different budget, something that you may not want to bond long term. I would suggest that's a conversation for soft costs. The infrastructure, meaning bringing in the data lines and those type of things, should be part of the construction, and I believe that I would envision that is included in our number. But the actual loose equipment, I would consider that to be soft costs, and that's not in the number that I have presented.
Okay, no, that's fine.
David, a question about the second floor. And Amity had been considering that for their transition program. And I wondered if
Yes.
there had been any conversations with them about particular needs that they may have in terms of design and use of that space, and how that might alter, what it might cost.
Sure. So I have not had recent conversations with them, but back in 2008, when we were doing this project, we had those conversations. And this floor plan that you see in front of you actually is the floor plan that was presented when we met with Amity. Now, their program may have changed slightly, and some of those details still need to work out, but in the placement of, as I mentioned, those actual cubbies were part of the conversation then. The restroom, the kitchenette, the small meeting room were actually part of that. But if this does advance forward and they are part of this, then we would need further conversations during design to hone in on that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else have any questions?
Yeah, one other thing, David, I'm assuming that once we get plans and all that, you're going to do an estimate of all the costs and everything else, a complete breakdown of everything that's included in whatever, as we've been on other projects.
Yes, yes. Yep, that is part of the traditional step. These are concepts, and let me stress that to everybody. These are concepts. I'm comparing cost per square foot. There's still design that needs to take place. At the same time, in 2018, we did a lot of the heavy lifting, and we had those numbers. So we're drawing on that, and that's what we would continue to use as we progress. So a lot of the work has been done, so we're not necessarily starting from scratch.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else have any questions? Okay, hearing none. So we can take this in. I don't think we're prepared to vote on anything this evening unless I'm wrong. We could come back next month with some further ideas and perhaps make some decisions. We have some things to talk about related to the old firehouse, related to the new firehouse, and the shed and things like that. So anyone have anything else they want to add, Tony, or?
I'm sorry, Beth.
Go ahead.
It's because just as regard, maybe Tony is a good person to ask, and not necessarily looking for an answer right now, but we are going to discuss it again next month. The transition program that Amity is looking at putting in there, I know that there were some dollars associated with that would offset some investment that's necessary into the building. If we could have that, that would be great. If we understood a little bit of that, that would certainly help in making the decision. You might be on mute, Tony. Not hearing you, Tony.
Tony? Tony, are you there? Okay.
Unmute, Tony.
Yeah, you're
You still look like you're on mute. Betsy might be. There you go.
off on. Now you're off. Tony, can we hear you? Yikes. Betsy, have you any thoughts on how we can fix this?
I'm not sure. He's unmuted, so that's something, it may be a problem with his computer. But it's not.
Nope.
He's
Okay.
Certainly don't, not looking for a specific answer now, Beth. I think he's heard what the question was, so I think it's fine.
We're going to need him shortly for his entire report, so
Yeah, you're right about that.
we have to resolve this. I apologize to the.
I'll try and call them on his phone, see what he says.
He can call in too. He can join via call.
I'll give him a call right now.
Okay.
You guys can,
I don't even know if he can hear us.
no, I'll find
Looked
out.
like he was trying to respond.
Yeah. Oh, it's so frustrating. Oh,
You can continue and I'll call him in the background.
okay. Well, the next item on, thank you, David, by the way, very, very
Thank you.
much.
Bye, everyone. Nice to see
Thank you,
everyone.
David.
Bye-bye.
Don't leave town now because we're going to
Thank
need
you very much.
Stay safe.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Okay. Let's see, item 6 on our agenda is public comments, and I just will ask Mrs. Shaw if there were any public comments submitted for our meeting this evening.
Just a moment, let me unmute her.
Right.
Oh, go ahead, Jerry.
No, I received no public comments as of 4:30 this afternoon.
Okay, thank you very much. And now we move up to item 7, which is Administrative Officers of Director of Finance Report. Jerry Weiner, have you been able to contact him?
No, I just saw him on the screen, so I thought he was all set. Why don't
It looks like from my, I don't know.
I'll
you there?
I'll go,
I'm emailing him the call-in stuff right now so he can join us via phone. He doesn't
Okay.
readily
Alright.
available.
All right. So let's see, item 8, we need Tony for. Item 9, we need Tony for. 10, we need Tony for. Should we try number 11?
Sure, I can do that.
Okay, we'll do Assistant Administrative Officer's report with approval from the board to jump around. Is that okay with everyone?
It is.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. So we'll move on to item 11 while Tony's getting fixed here.
And I'll talk slowly because I don't have a lot to share. So as you all should know, we've been sending out weekly emails from the town to residents to keep everyone updated. And as things start to slow down a bit, we are going to be backing off. So under normal circumstances, I send an email out once a month on behalf of Beth to the community. It usually comes out immediately following the Board of Selectmen meeting to give folks an update on what happened during the meeting and anything else relevant that may be useful to them. And so we'll be sending one out at the end of this week, and then we will scale back and do one every other week instead of every week. And that will free up some of my time and some of Beth's time to start working on things that have been on hold since the pandemic totally upended our lives. And then the other thing, just to let you all know, is that I will be, I am reaching out to the business community. It's slow going. I'm trying to call everybody, going in alphabetical order. So just reaching out to folks to see if they're open, how they're doing, if there's anything else that they need from the town that we may be able to help with, or at least pass along the word to our partners at the state or the federal agencies. And that's all I've got. And Tony looks like he's on the line with us now. I've unmuted you, Tony.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right.
A number of folks have just asked me about different information periodically in passing or through text and emails. If they want to get on the list for the information that you're sending out, how is that done? Apparently they're asking me things and I say, well, that I saw that on the email that comes out, and they're saying, well, I didn't get one. If they want to get on it, what would they do to go about doing that?
They could email you or they could email me. If you have their email, you could forward it to me. Several people have emailed me. Anyone who has the emails can share them with anyone else. And I believe, I'll double check this, but I believe there's a link within the email that lets people sign up. I know people have reached out to Beth, people have reached out to me, and periodically I'm posting them on Facebook with a link for people to sign up. But the easiest way is probably to, if you have their email, to send it to me and I can sign them up quickly for that.
Good. Thanks, Betsy.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Mika, you had a question related to the firehouse, I think, that went to Tony, and he unfortunately, we lost him for a couple of minutes there, but he's back now. So there he is.
Tony, I think you heard the question, didn't you?
I was trying to I had to switch from the computer to the laptop to the phone, so now I think I finally made it a successful connection, so I did not hear it.
It was just, and certainly not looking necessarily for an answer right now, but Beth said we would be discussing this again probably next month. And I know the transition program from Amity, there were some dollars associated with that could offset some of the investment that we need to make in terms of preparing the building itself. So obviously that information would be helpful as we kind of consider what we need to do now, what we're going to do next.
I could certainly get that information. We've done some preliminary work on that. and can try to get an idea of what that is for the next meeting. The other thing I wanted to mention was that it's we're in a rare time where construction costs, as David indicated, are flat,
Yep.
and interest rates are incredibly low. So
Yeah.
those two things don't happen at the same time that often.
Right,
So I just wanted to mention.
right. So we'll definitely have this on the agenda for next month related to the firehouse. Put your thinking caps on. We'll try to get more information. We'll speak with the fire department and about the shed and things like that. So we'll have more stuff. And if you have any things that you would like us to get data for before the meeting, please be in touch with either me or Tony as soon as possible. So we'll make sure we have a robust discussion on this next one.
I thought another thing that would be helpful would be if I had a little debt analysis for you as to where our debt is and how that, how that all shakes out currently.
That's a very good idea. Thank you for reminding us about
Thanks,
that.
Tom.
That was in my head to talk about, because if we're losing some debt, perhaps, I don't know if we are or not, but seeing where we are, is it possible to absorb debt without having an increase?
Might be a good time to refinance that too. Thanks, Tony.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep. He's on that like white on rice. Tony is all.
So I do think that, speaking for Beecher, I know that they had some top priority projects, and we may want to reach out to them, because obviously it looks like we would have to borrow money to do any of this work, and we might as well bundle this together, especially if we're at a point of low construction costs and low borrowing costs.
Exactly, exactly. There's a couple of the things that we can think about as well that are smaller, we could combine with this. We'll just have to see.
Okay.
That's great. Thank you, guys. Okay, now we'll go on to number 7. We had to get you back, Tony, for all these items. We did, just so you know, we did the Assistant Administrative Officer report.
Okay.
Okay, so now we're back to number 7, the Administrative Officer's Director of Finances report, and item A is the monthly report.
Okay, so through the end of May, we have a budgetary surplus of about a little over $500,000. This does not include any funds that will be returned from the school. Because we have an allocation of fund balance of $400,000, that leaves us with about $115,000 that would be added to our fund balance. And if the school returns a half of their surplus, that would be another $90,000. So you can sort of do the math there. We'd be approaching or approximately $200,000 for a surplus for the end of the year. We do have some items that we are gathering information on for FEMA reimbursement of 75% for COVID-related costs, mostly centered around the fire department, the police department, and public works, building maintenance departments. And so we're looking to apply for those reimbursements. And also there's a state program that we could possibly get another 25%. So that would be hopefully 100% reimbursement. This is our goal.
Tony, is that the CARES Act?
No, that's called, the CARES is education.
Okay.
This is called an acronym for it. It escapes me.
It's okay. It's okay. Thank you.
Okay. In our revenue section, we have still have a deficit of about $150,000 projected for our tax collections. That hasn't really changed since last month. Some of the good those are back taxes or taxes that are owed for previous years. We have a deficit of about $100,000 in projected in charge for services, which is all related to recreation programs that were canceled. There's an offsetting savings in wages, however, which is also about $100,000. Interest income is probably have a shortfall of about $60,000, and our state grants will help us a little bit here, and we have a surplus of about $150,000, largely due to an increase in ECS grant revenue that we did not budget for. On our expenditures, we have surpluses in a few departments, largely centered around personnel moves. In the Selectmen's department, we have about $40,000 surplus, a vacant position that was not filled. In the registrar of voters, there's a surplus of about $23,000 because of the primary is moved to the next fiscal year. The police department should generate about $30,000 surplus, as they've had vacant officer positions. The building official should have a surplus of about $30,000 as we hired a part-time building official. There's a savings there. Public Works has currently a vacant mechanics position, and we eliminated a mechanic position. So as a result, they have probably a surplus of about $70,000 to $80,000. Waste management will definitely have a deficit. I was going to hold off till next month to fund that based on our activities for this month. And that should be about a deficit of about $40,000 to $45,000. Most of that is in bulky waste cycling costs. Human Services, a surplus of about $50,000 due to a vacant senior center director position. Recreation, as I indicated, about $110,000 surplus, mostly due to part-time wages or programs that were canceled. The library should post a surplus of about $70,000 due to part-time wages that were eliminated due to the closure of the library. And finally, benefits are about $60,000 due to reduced workers' compensation premiums, and also a lot of the savings from the earlier positions that were or part-time wages that were eliminated. There's savings in FICA and Medicare and other savings. We do have an offset on that as we start to pay unemployment claims for those individuals that were laid off here at the town. We have to pay based on our experience, and there's a percentage formula that we pay based on the experience that we have. So it's basically a pass-through for the state. We do not pay into a large pool that a lot of other businesses pay into.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Tony on the monthly report? Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Item B is funding requests, and let's see if I can keep these in order. Funding request number 1. I hope Tony, follow along with me because I mess these up. 1920-20 in the amount of $29,207,000 to fund the cost of living increases for various departments in FY20, and those are non-union personnel, such as the tax collector, regular assistants, assessor, regular.
There's both, Beth, just so I can clarify, there's both union and non-union personnel.
Okay,
there.
sorry, thank you. The fire chief, the fire marshal, assistant fire chief, regular clerical, a couple of those. Regular all other, and part-time all other, and overtime regular. So just to get the ball rolling, I will make a motion that we approve this. It is coming from contingency into various departments, obviously. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Sandy. Does anyone have any questions or comments?
I want to provide some background.
Thank you.
Good. Yeah. So if you recall, when we created the budget last year, we did not have contracts that were settled. So we had to instead increase our contingency to allow for the possibility of cost of living adjustments that we did not know. So as you can see here, there aren't a lot of departments here. You'll notice there's no police, there's no public works, largely because some of the personnel moves and some of the things we discussed earlier, there was not a need to transfer in the funds to those departments because there were vacant positions. So as a result, there was not a need to fund the cost of living adjustments in each of those departments because of the vacant position. Okay. Hopefully that makes sense.
That is very helpful, Tony.
Yeah.
Right.
So you'll see, as a matter of fact, a good portion of the departments, a transfer was not necessary because of some of the moves that are done earlier.
Great.
That explains why this is a much shorter list than usual.
It's a much shorter list and a much lower number.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions, comments? Okay, so we have a motion and I believe we have a second. I will call the question. Question? Okay. Oh, we're getting so good at this. Everyone in favor, please say aye.
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 Is there anyone opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. Thank you. This beats calling everybody out one by one. The next item for funding request number is 1920-21, amount of, I hope that's not me, in the amount of $10,000. And this is the fund to fund a technology consultant to assist with cybersecurity. Maybe Tony, you'd like to explain why it's the 10,000 and where it came from.
Sure. This is $10,000 is required. It's from contingency, and it's the amount that's the town's portion to help with our technology consultant to assist with our cybersecurity needs and issues.
The rest, I believe, is covered under insurance. Is that correct?
That's correct.
This is our deductible.
Tony, that's the deductible payment.
That's a deductible. Yeah,
Okay.
you're correct.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so would someone like to make a motion that we approve this?
So moved, Dwight.
Thank you, Dwight. Is there a second?
Make a second.
Thank you. Any further discussion or questions for Tony or anyone else? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. The next item, funding request number 1920-22, is $27,000. And Tony, I'll have you explain this one, please.
Sure.
Thank you.
The next three items are very similar, and they are all capital projects that were approved in the capital budget process, but were removed at the direction of the Board of Finance to help offset next year's budget, be paid out of this year's contingency. So there are three such projects. There's the technology at Beecher School. There's an equipment reserve for Public Works, which is essentially a payment on a sweeper. And there's a police vehicle.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have any questions about those before we motion? Okay, so I'll make a motion that we approve funding request number 1920-22 in the amount of $27,000. That is to fund the FY21 Woodbridge Board of Education capital budget technology request. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Sandy. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Is there any opposition? I don't think I heard any. Okay, that motion passes. Thank you. The next one is funding request number 1920-23 in the amount of $40,000, as Tony mentioned, for the FY21 Public Works capital budget request for the heavy equipment lease payment for a sweeper. I'll make a motion that we approve that. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Sandy. Where's everybody out there? Okay.
Takes you a minute to get off the mute.
I know, I'm sorry. Where were we? Motion second. Any further discussion on this? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposition? Don't hear any. That one passes. And last is funding request number 1920-24 in the amount of $48,490. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion made.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Dwight.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions or discussion on this? I will call the question. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposition? That motion passes. Thank you very much. I think that's it, right, Tony? Done them all?
Right. So I just want to clarify, Tony, that there's still 141,000 left in contingency, even with our approval of these requests. Okay.
Thank you, Sandy. Good point. All right. Item C under this report is the bid waiver, and the first one is you have in your packet memo from Warren Connors to Tony regarding the annual catch basin cleaning. Tony, you might want to explain it. I'm assuming Warren is not coming in on this, so
No,
I'd like to go over this. It's a fairly self-explanatory memo, but maybe you want to elaborate.
Sure. So what we do in this situation is we're using a bid that was done by the Capital Region COG. And the Capital Region COG has gone out and bid this for many of their communities, and we are allowed to piggyback on that bid. And it's for Janet's Sweeping Property Care, whom we've used in the past. And essentially what they'll do is they will go around and vacuum out and clean out all of the catch basins in town. And it's what we do annually. Helps with the water flow and the when there rains, that kind of thing.
And this is already in his budget, correct?
That's correct. This is simply a purchasing request. It's already in the budget.
Okay. I would move that we let Janet's Sweeping and Property Care Company perform the annual catch basin cleaning.
Second.
Better? Okay, thank you. Dwight seconded it. Okay, thank you. And anyone have any other questions? All in favor, I'll call the motion. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Thank you very much. Any nays? Hearing none, motion passes. Thank you very much. And now there's a second, where is it here? Again, a letter, a memo from Warren Connors in your packet to Tony regarding the bid for street center line painting. Tony, would you like to take this one, please? Just a little bit of an explanation.
Sure. This is a bid for center line painting and for all center line markings on town roads. And on this bid, we are requesting to use the State of Connecticut contract award, which many communities use. And they'll essentially be using epoxy marking paint to paint all the lines, center lines throughout town. And this is in the budget also, and this actually holds up for 5 years, so we don't have to repaint lines for 5 years.
That's very good. I noticed there are a lot of roads that need it, so that's good.
It's definitely, we're definitely.
Yeah.
Can I just ask a clarifying question, Tony? So the second paragraph says that the rate is 33 cents per mile. Is that per foot?
No, not per mile. Yeah,
It's per foot.
yeah,
Okay.
per foot, correct.
Yeah. Because that would be quite a deal. And
Yeah.
the total number would be off. So,
That's a
okay.
good catch.
That was a good pickup, Sandy. Yeah.
Okay.
Wow. Thank you very much. So with that, I'll make a motion that we approve the to waive the bidding to utilize this contract for the vendor Safety Marking Incorporated. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Call the question. Say aye.
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 Thank you. Anyone opposed? Thank you very much. That motion passes unanimously. Okay, item D on the agenda is the refinancing of debt related to the Country Club of Woodbridge, and I will ask who wants to start, either Tony or Jerry, I'm not sure.
I will start.
Tony,
I'll give you some background.
Thank you.
In 2009, as you all know, the town of Woodbridge borrowed $7 million for the purchase of the former Woodbridge Country Club. We've been paying since 2012 a principal payment of $350,000 a year, and since that time, we have been paying that as a taxable note, which essentially means that each year we reissue the note. The notes are only a 1 year, up to 1 year. And we issue them on a taxable basis, which means that the person investing in the note has to pay taxes on the interest earnings that they make. So that's why it's called a taxable note, and typically reserved for a use that's not related to government. So in this case, if we were contemplating on selling the property or a portion of the property, that would be a taxable use, which is why those notes were always taxable. Generally, because the individual has to pay taxes on their interest, typically we pay more for a taxable note than we would for a tax exempt. And in this case, it happens to be true. So the question is, what do we do moving forward? because our note matures on July 17th of 2020, which means that we have to issue an official statement, go out to the market, get bids, get, bond council approval, get all that done, so that we have the money on July 17th to pay off the maturing notes. So we have to decide this week, actually, so we can finish our official statement and begin that process. So we could either reissue taxable notes. As I indicated earlier, the market is historic lows. We can reissue taxable notes and those mature in 1 year. If you do that, you're taking a risk on the market going up, which I'm guessing almost certainly it would, considering we're at such a low rate currently. We could issue bonds, and the bonds could either be at a taxable rate or a tax exempt rate or some combination. And that taxability or non-taxable or tax exempt of the bonds depends on your contemplation or your goals or use of the property. And Jerry, you probably explain that in a little more detail.
Yes, but we've had a couple of conversations. Tony and I have had several conversations with bond counsel, and Tony has been talking to the financial advisor for the town. And the issue is, as Tony said, number one, very easy for the town to now continue on with the taxable notes. That basically is avoiding making the decision for permanent longer term financing, or whether because of the interest rates and because of the status of the property at this point, the last possible deal with a developer has fallen through, whether you want to take the position of locking in a very, very low rate and getting some permanent financing as opposed to do the temporary financing. Bond counsel Joe Fozzie has said that he thinks this is an opportunity for the town to lock in a permanent rate. And the next question is, if you agree to do that, the next question is whether all or some of the property shall be locked in at tax exempt, which is more favorable to the town in terms of the interest we have to pay, or whether we should do a combination of tax exempt and taxable. If we do all taxable bonds and someone comes up and makes the town a very lucrative offer for the property, which is at this point unlikely, but you've got to consider that, and that's what our bond counsel told us to consider. At that point, if we issued non-taxable notes and somebody came up with a lucrative order that the town wanted to take, at that point we would have to take the difference between what the non-taxable rate is now and the taxable rate. In other words, we get slightly penalized for expecting that the town has no present intention of selling the property, which is necessary for the town to say and for the Board of Selectmen to approve a resolution tonight, if that's what you want to do. And then you're not precluded if you say that and somebody comes up with an unexpected or expected offer, you can still sell it, but there is a process that you have to go through to try and avoid a penalty. And bond counsel said to us today that based on our experience and the town negotiating very strongly to try and sell it, it would be inconsistent with now saying to the IRS at some point in time in the future that we never intended or we never had a reasonable expectation of selling. So the bottom line is, and the bottom line is that bond counsels indicated that it would be probably a safer and more reliable position to take that some of the bonds be issued as non-taxable and some be taxable. And he thought that a logical way to do this is that since the town has always said in the past that even if the town approves sale of some of the property, we are going to retain a good portion of the property, which is about 100 acres out of the total 150 acres. And the proposal was only to sell 50 acres, which is 1/3. It would be very reasonable to have 2/3 of the issue be non-taxable, because the town has never has not indicated the willingness to sell that at this point, or made any efforts to sell the 2/3 parcel, and having the 1/3 be issued as taxable, which is consistent what we have done in the past. And also, in the event somebody comes up and makes an offer for a third of the property, which is all the town has been marketing in the past, then there won't be any tax consequences in terms of penalties. So the decision is all non-taxable, all taxable, or a portion of both. Bond counsel's recommendation, I think, was to consider seriously 1/3 to be taxable and 2/3 to be non-taxable. Did I
Just-
get it?
Check.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, just to give you a sort of a frame of reference here. A neighboring community issued a 10-year tax exempt bond, and it was at 0.91%. Just
Wow.
for comparative purposes, we issued a 10-year bond for the radio, and it was 2.44%.
So Tony, also just to be, if we do a combination of both, you would do a blended rate. If we got the same kind of a rate, it would be 0.9.
I think you do two different issues. So you would have two issues. One issue would be, say, 2.8 million or somewhere around there at a tax exempt rate, which would be 9.9 or 1%. And then the taxable rate is probably around 2%, maybe a little less. So you'd have a blended rate, as you indicated, of probably in the low, between 1 and 1.5%.
And what are we paying right now, Tony, in terms of our notes?
The current note is a net interest cost of, yeah, I've got it right here, 2.3586.
Mhm.
And that was a 1 year. At that time, the 1 year rate was 2.35.
Right. So this would lock us in then for the 10 years that it will take to pay off the debt.
That's correct. It would lock in the rate for the 10 years, and we would not have to issue each year as we are currently doing.
Okay. Well, I think it makes sense, given that we had wanted to offer the town residents the opportunity to approve or not approve another use of that property, and that is what we have always proposed that we would do, so that even though we may not actively solicit anything, there could be proposals that come along. And I don't think we want to be disingenuous in terms of saying that we would not want to be able to generate some, financial benefit from one piece of that property for the town. And we need that option going forward. So I would support the 1/3, 2/3.
Okay. Anyone else have comments?
I have a question, Joe Dyke. So if we do the 1/3, 2/3, and we don't sell the 1/3, we in essence pay the penalty.
No.
No, there's no penalty.
Well, you're paying more for it than you will pay if you didn't do it.
That's correct.
That's correct.
Well,
So you are effectively paying a penalty, is what I'm saying. So has anybody done the analysis of any kind of a break even of how long? In other words, let's say we don't sell anything for 5 years, and we pay that extra interest rate. Would we have been better off just paying the penalty? Tony, am I making any kind of sense? I mean,
Joe,
we don't know what we're doing with the property, and so right now we're agreeing, in essence, to overpay with the thought that we might sell it. I'm not sure that makes sense.
I thought it was just the opposite. I thought basically, Joe just said, what we're saying is 2/3 we would do non-taxable, which would be the lower rate, correct, Tony?
That's correct.
So the 1/3 would be the taxable, which would be the higher rate. So you're paying a higher rate on 1/3 versus the whole thing if you do full non-taxable. I think what we're actually saying is
But if you're not gonna sell any portion of the property, you do the whole thing, not.
But we just got off a bid where we were saying we're going to sell a third. How do we convince somebody that we've decided not to sell anything? You know what I mean? So
I don't know. Do we? But we may not sell it whether we want to or not.
Right.
I mean, that's why I'm saying, is there any kind of a number crunch or break even crunch here? How long, you know, let's say we held this for 8 years and we didn't sell the property.
Well,
Maybe
I think the
we
thing
would have been
is,
better off.
Joe, it's still lower than what we're paying right now. And given that we don't know what the note rates would be in the future, it's probably never going to be as low as what we can get either of the taxable or non-taxable rate right now.
I agree. I agree. We need to do something. The question is, do we do it all non-taxable, or do we do 2/3 non-taxable and 1/3 taxable? That's the question.
But if you're doing the total thing non-taxable, I'm not sure if that's what you're saying we should do, because then that completely limits our options.
Well, no, it doesn't limit your options. What it means is you pay a penalty
If you sell it,
that
that's what it means. If you ever do sell it, you'll
That's
pay a
what it
penalty.
means. It doesn't limit your options. And what I'm saying is, if you don't sell the property, you're in essence paying a penalty too. Is
At what point, yeah. So whatever the
That's what-
percentage is difference in terms of the penalty, at some point in time, you break even if you don't pay it. I'm sorry.
One way or another, paying extra money if you don't do the whole thing non-taxable.
I understand what you're saying.
So Joe,
So
you
the question,
very good point, obviously, and in terms of economics and dollars, a good point. I frankly haven't done, I wouldn't know how to begin to do the numbers. Tony probably could figure it out at some point. But in addition to
nor
the,
would I, by the way.
right,
Yeah,
in addition
nor would
to-
I. I'm just
You
raising
have to
this.
start off by knowing what the differences are and what the penalties are. Otherwise, you can't come up with anything exact.
Right. But in addition to the economics of the situation, and my gut tells me, and Joe Fozzie seemed to indicate that he didn't think it would be really significant over a period of time. It's going to, the concern is the board making a statement that they have no present intention of selling the property, when the history of the property has always been try and negotiate a sale and find a buyer. So in addition to the it is a question of being comfortable making that kind of a statement based on the history, and that's you know, that's the issue. How do people feel about saying there's no reasonable expectation whatsoever selling any of this property between now and time until the bonds are paid off?
Which is about 11 years.
11 years, and that's what Joe Fozzie said would be, and he gave us a motion. And when I looked at the motion, I said, no, I'm not sure that the Board of Selectmen would feel entirely comfortable saying this. And he kind of lit some credence to that. And so it's a monetary issue, as well as if somebody came along now and made a terrific offer for the property, I think there would be an inclination at least to go to the town to say if we want to sell it or not, as opposed to saying, no, we have no intention of selling it. So it's economics plus that little ringer in there.
So if I hear you correctly, by bonding the entire piece at a non-taxable rate, we're somehow saying to people, we don't want to sell any portion of the property.
You're saying to the IRS and to bond and the investors in the bond, you know, the people who are going to buy the bond because they're expecting it to be non-taxable for all those years, and we could pay the difference if it turns out that we have a phenomenal offer that the whole town wants to take and get some revenue in. So that's why
we pay a penalty.
Yes.
And why do they care?
Well,
Why does who care?
Why would the?
Why do people? I'm missing. I guess I'm missing the whole point. But if we paid the penalty, right? I'm trying to understand why we're telling the world, investors, bond people, that we're never going to want to sell this property by doing non-taxable bonds. That I'm trying to understand how that statement holds true.
There's a requirement, whenever you do sell non-taxable bonds, you have to make that representation. The IRS
So we have to, that's what I missed. I apologize. So we
There's
have
a-
to make
oh,
a
yeah.
representation right now. Okay.
Absolutely. There's a-
Sorry, I missed that.
That's the main underlying the pinnings of getting tax exempt bonds. You can't intend to use it for anything other than municipal
So
purpose.
what, just so you, when we do the closing, there's a number of documents. One is a tax closure document, which we have to sign, which indicates, as Jerry had said, that we have no intention of using this for a taxable purpose, that it would be a tax exempt purpose. And there's a couple of qualifiers for
Well,
that.
yeah, okay, now I get it. So if we were gonna do all non-taxable, we would have to agree right now that we were gonna make a statement. We would never sell any portion of that property, right?
Right.
Right. And Joe, to be fair, the motion says we have no reasonable expectation of selling any of the property in the future or using it for anything other than municipal purposes. I forget what the exact wording is. So when you look
Right.
at reasonable expectation, you're a lawyer and well, we really don't have a reasonable expectation because we don't have a buyer now and we're not going to, but based on our history, Fozzie
Right.
thought it would be much more prudent opposed to making that
I
statement.
get it.
Okay, good.
I get it. Now, that broad language gives you a way out, but still you want to be, I get it.
You don't want to be disingenuous. Right.
No,
Okay.
I get it.
So this am I off mute? Yes,
Yes.
okay. I'm sorry. Trying to not make noise in between. So Tony sent me Joe Fozzie's language this afternoon and I will read it. Is this appropriate time or are there more discussion on this?
No, you can
Everyone?
read.
Okay. Thank you. Resolved that the town of Woodbridge has no present intention to sell 2/3 of the acreage of the golf course property and reasonably expects to retain ownership and use of that portion of the golf course property, and he put this in bold and underlined, for town use for the foreseeable future, or at least for so long as bonds of the town, the interest of which is exempt from federal income tax, are outstanding.
And that's just, Joe, that's just for 2/3. If you wanted to do
Right.
100%, it would say 100% of the property for town use. So that's
Correct.
I get it. Thanks.
Okay, does anyone have any comments on that? So now we need, what, Jerry?
a motion, second and vote
To
on it.
accept that resolved?
Yes.
Or,
Is the 1/3 then handled in a separate motion?
So I guess we can say 1/3.
taxable?
Yeah.
And you don't need a motion for the 1/3 because that's going to be taxable.
That's-
Okay.
that's-
Oh, okay.
I
that's right.
see. Okay,
All
okay.
right, great.
So we're just certifying for the 2/3 as
Correct.
to why we want the non-taxable rate. Okay, great.
Okay. So would someone like to make that motion?
So moved.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Okay, thank you, Mika. Any further discussion or questions for Tony or Jerry? Okay, I will ask now to all say aye. If you approve, say aye.
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 Any nay? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Let's see, where are we? Oh, Tony, do you have any other?
No other.
Yay, okay, thank you. Number 8 is designation for emergency telecommunication service credit to Medcom. You have in your packet, get to the right page here, sorry. A letter that was sent to me from Harry Thompson, planning specialist from the state of Connecticut, Department of Emergency Services and Public Protection. Tony, maybe you'd like to explain it. I think we do this every year, but take it away.
We do this every year. We're eligible for a regional telecommunication service credit, which we get every year based on a per capita factor that they announce. This year, the Woodbridge credit for 2021 is $2,641.50. Because we do not have our own, we're part of a regional telecommunication service. That is who we designate the credit to, as do other towns that receive the same credit.
Thank you.
Okay.
There's a second page to this, which is in accordance with the provisions of section 7 of the regulations of the state of Connecticut. The town of Woodbridge designates the following CMed provider. And we would put in CMed providers as the recipients of its regional emergency telecommunication service credit for coordinated medical emergency response CMed services for fiscal year 2020-21. And I guess I need a motion for me to, then we'll have discussion on this. There's probably going to be discussion. So the motion would be that allowing or authorizing the mayor or first selectman, which would be me, to sign this agreement. So I'll make that motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Sandy. Okay, does anyone have any questions or discussion on this?
Are we planning to use AMR as our thing, CMed for the next fiscal year? We haven't had that talk yet, that conversation. So
Correct.
I'm sort of like, is this gonna tie us into AMR, okay, for the next year, for the next fiscal year?
Back with AMR expires on,
December 31st, I think.
yeah, so, and we're gonna, as you indicated last time, we're gonna start to have some discussions about the next year after December 31st. I know it's in the middle of the, but this should not tie us up with AMR. We should be able to go ahead and either negotiate or renegotiate, get somebody else, or go to the state and say, we want to we want to have our license back and have it belong to the town.
I just wanted to make sure we're not being tied in for the entire fiscal year. That's because it looks like it's tying us in here. As long as we have that opportunity that we can break it and we can use somebody else for CMed, I'm okay with it.
Tony, is this appropriated at a particular time? I mean, we pay them more than $2,600 for a year, so.
Right, we pay them maybe $5,000-$6,000 for a year, but this $2,600 offsets that contribution.
Right, but I mean,
It's a
can we
fine-
use this contribution for the first half of the year since we're talking now to December?
So the AMR contract is for the paramedic services. That's different than the CMed,
Right.
which MedCom,
Right.
Right,
which I'm not 100% sure. I believe that's a year-to-year situation.
Calendar year or fiscal year?
A fiscal year, yeah.
Okay, fiscal year.
There may be a provision where you have to give notice to leave MedCom, but I believe that's all. There's like a notice provision.
Mhm.
I don't remember how many months, but
I think it's a couple months, 30
Yeah.
days, get out.
Okay.
Anyone have any other questions or discussion on this matter? Hearing none, I will call the question. I think we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. Thank you very much. Let's see. Moving along, item 9, discussion on the 2021-2022 budget process. You will recall prior to the pandemic, when we were putting our budget together, I believe in February, to send it forward to the Board of Finance. We had some discussions as a group that we wanted to revisit our discussion for the process for next year. And I was asked to bring this, and Jerry Shaw reminded me, thank goodness, to bring this forward at the June meeting. That was a suggestion. So I emailed, I know who was very excited about this was Sandy as well as Joe Dye, to please bring forward your comments and to open up the discussion about how we proceed, because now is the time rather than waiting until August or September when the budget process is already in full speed, given the fact that even though we're in a pandemic, we still have to go forward on these kind of things. So with that, I'll open it up to anyone, maybe Sandy or Joe Dye would like to start as to some of the things you might have had in mind when we talked about this in February.
So if I recall correctly, one of our basic premises was that we were not giving enough concrete direction to the department heads about scenarios that we would like to consider and like them to consider in terms of their budgets. So when you say it's a 0% increase, that's not enough of a direction. We, as the Board of Selectmen, I think, need to understand what any budget submission request is and how it actually impacts the services that they are able to provide. So if we're saying 0%, does that include salaries? Does it not include salaries? To be able to reach 0%, how would services be impacted in terms of what they provide to town residents? If we want to see a scenario that's a reduction of 5%, and Joe had brought this up, before we could make a decision, we would need to understand what does that mean in terms of how services would be impacted. I think what complicates the situation is the pandemic that we are experiencing and what was actually cut from our current budget. And I think that there are certain programs such as recreation and library that if we were to restore their ability to provide services, that already means an increase in their budget. So we have to consider all of those factors. So Joe, you want to add some other thoughts?
Thanks, Sandy. I think that's what we had discussed when we brought this up a few months back, and from a high level, I think that captures it. My thought was, I don't know exactly how we develop our budgets in town. I have a suspicion and a decent idea just from the outside and what I've seen over the years, but so I'm long-windedly getting to, does it make sense for us to put a little task force together to work with Tony and whomever else is intimately involved in developing these budgets, learn how it's done, and then we could see if there's a better way to do it in line with what you just laid out. Because I don't know how you offer up suggestions to better a process that you really don't have a real good working knowledge of how it even works. That's my thought. So, we put together ad hoc committee here, ad hoc committee there. Maybe we put together a little task force that dives into how we develop our budget, and is there a better way to do it?
And Joe, are you offering to take that on as a member of a task force?
You could be on that task force? Yeah, sure, I'll be on the task force.
Fabulous.
I don't want to be a task force of one, however.
I would never allow that to happen. You need friends. Everybody needs buds. So
Right.
the question is, how do the other members of the board feel? Joe Crisco? Joe with us?
He is, but he
Might be on mute.
muted. I've just unmuted someone. I think it's him.
Yeah. So I think one thing.
Wait, Joe just said we can hear you. Can we hear you, Joe?
Yeah, could you hear me?
Yes. Do you have any thoughts on this?
No, I'm okay.
Okay. Mika, maybe, or Sandy wanted to say something. Go ahead.
I think we have to be cognizant of the fact that this isn't something that can go on for many months. And so it needs to be pretty well defined, and there has to be kind of an end date that we would then, implement whatever the group comes up with or explore it. So that it's in enough time as the department heads start to look at their budget for the next year, that they have the direction they need.
So Tony, Genevieve, maybe you give us an idea. You tell us every year and I always forget, when is probably the drop dead deadline? We would have to have some sort of recommendations out to the department heads related to the capital and operating budgets.
So the capital budget, we try to release the documentation at the end of September, and that usually is due by the middle of November.
Mhm.
And then in October, we release the operating budget packets, and those are due the first week of January.
Thank you. So it would probably be important to have all of this completed, maybe in August, which gives us a couple of months, correct?
August or early September.
Okay. All right. If there's something that would need to be voted on, we could do it at the beginning of September?
Yeah.
And that's still okay for putting
Yep.
out the packages? Okay.
Tony,
Yeah,
just to make
fine.
sure, I'm sorry, Tamika, just to make sure I understand though, that's when they'll be actually presenting, correct? In
No.
September, October, something.
No.
That's when we release all the budget guidelines,
Got
the,
it. Okay. Got it. Thank you.
information. Right.
So they have to be ready, our recommendations have to be ready to go into the guidelines that are released in
September for
September.
capital and October for operating.
Right, and presumably if the board wants to agree to vote on these at some, or consensus somehow, we'd probably have to do it at the September Board of Selectmen meeting at the latest.
Yeah, that's fine.
But I
Okay.
would think that we would need some type of recommendation in August
Yeah.
so that we can really think about this.
I think we should talk about it. My personal opinion is we should talk about it next month, once we can get some volunteers to work on this.
Okay,
I personally don't want to do that. I'm kind of jammed up with other stuff, but if there's other members of the board creating this task force or whatever we want to call it, is there anyone else that might be interested in working with Joe? He doesn't want to be alone.
I would be interested in working with Joe.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, I would too. Joe Good.
Okay. Anyone else? Great. So we have 3 members.
With Tony, with
Jerry-
Tony.
Tony, obviously. Jerry, how do we create this so it we're just a point, we'll agree to have a task force and to come up with budget recommendations?
Yeah, I think that's really all you need to do. You're just going to create a task force, and you as the first
Okay.
selectman authority to do that.
Okay, so I will take that authority and do that. And the 3 members are Sandy, Joe Dye, and Joe Crisco, correct? And you will come back in July, our July meeting with your beginnings, again in August, and for a vote in September for the full board, but you'll keep us apprised of it all along. How's that sound?
Sounds
Is that all
good.
they need? Is that all they need, Jerry? Okay. Oh, you're
Yes.
Jerry.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Okay, and thank you, Tony. All righty, let's see. Item number 10 on the agenda is to approve the cost of living increases for the non-union personnel, which we did vote to approve the funding for that in our underfunding requests. And again, it's the tax collector
Can I
assistance.
clarify that for a moment?
Please do. Thank you so
Okay,
much.
so
Jumping in.
the funding that you approved was for this year, for this fiscal year. This is for a cost of living increase for next fiscal year.
Okay,
That is already in the budget.
okay. Okay, and the personnel that this is for is just all non-union, like the registrars, tax collector, fire chief, the other examples, Tony? Is that it?
At the mostly department heads, as you indicated, we offer the same, we have the same increase for the fire chief, the assistant chief, for the registrars, for many department heads, for human services, many
Tax-
departments.
Tax collector, okay.
Library.
Okay, very good. I'll make a motion that we approve the cost of living increases for non-union personnel for next year, correct?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you.
Correct.
Any discussion on this?
The percent is 2.5%.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'll add that. If Sandy will accept a friendly
Yes.
addition there.
Yep.
Thank you for that percent. All right, and we have a second. I will call, anyone have any questions, but any further questions on this before we call the question? Okay, I will ask, first of all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed? And is there anyone abstaining?
Crisco abstain.
Crisco, okay. Thank you very much. Okay. I thought I could hear you in the background. Okay, thank you. So we have approval by 5 no nays, and 1 abstention. Correct. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is number 11, the assistant. We did that. Yay. Betsy, you're good. We did that. Next is town council's report, and I know Jerry has something to discuss with us. And I sent out another email that I received today from a parent who is again concerned about the turf materials that had been approved, if you recall, at referendum last year. There's some concern. There's another board member, Donna Suster, that has also been calling me. She's not sending emails, but she's been calling me. Someone's moving papers. Sorry. Anyway, maybe Jerry, you should take it away. Okay, go ahead.
So this is basically for informational purposes. Beth wanted us to at least report on some of this issue. As you see by the letters that you just received in your by email today, I think, or yesterday, there's a group of very concerned citizens who live around the high school who
Jerry just froze.
Yeah, I was just going to say I don't hear him.
You hear me?
Now we can hear you.
Okay. There was a referendum passed by the region, even though Woodbridge, one of the 3 towns, did not vote in favor of this particular expenditure for replacement of the grass with artificial turf. There are a group of residents who, after the vote, have raised some issues with the environmental safety of the material that's going to be used at the field. I had one discussion with one of the people who were involved in this, and Beth, I think, has had many. And my advice was that this is a private matter, that if they feel they have some cause of action to try and prevent the installation of the material that was approved at referendum, they should consult private counsel. And we repeated that advice. They've come back and they say they think that the town, Woodbridge, since the property is in Woodbridge, that the town should undertake an effort to prevent this installation from happening. And it's my opinion that the town is in no position to undertake this, what I believe is a private cause of action, for the homeowners to pursue on their own, rather than the town do this. Their theory is, because it's in Woodbridge, the town owns a land adjacent to this property, that we need to take the lead and take the responsibility and bear the cost of this effort. We have no idea whether it's a meritorious effort. They have very interesting claims, persuasive claims, but no one knows whether there is any validity to it. And it was not brought up prior to the referendum. It was after the referendum was approved. So my advice to Beth was that, again, this should remain a private matter between these individuals and the Amity Regional Board, as opposed to the Woodbridge, essentially bringing an action against itself as one of the members of the region. So if anybody has any questions or has other thoughts, just let me know.
So if we took this on, we would be essentially suing ourselves or fighting ourselves, the town.
Well, be fighting the region and perhaps the town, because the
Right.
town, yes.
Okay. Anyone have any comments on this?
Just an FYI, planning and zoning was hoping to have a public hearing in July. I don't know if that's still on or not.
Okay.
Yes, there is an application. There is something that's going before inland wetlands that the Amity Board, the Amity Regional Board, has to have certain kind of permission. And that's another possibility of these homeowners presenting their argument to the Inland Wetlands Commission on that application.
No, plan and zoning.
Zoning, not inland wetlands.
Yeah, yeah.
So what type of authority would TPZ have over this?
I think they need some kind of a permit to go ahead and do the work. I'm not exactly sure what it is. I wasn't looking at it, but they do need permission from TP&Z to proceed with the work.
I mean,
think
yeah, go ahead.
that they had some kind of an application before inland wetlands a while ago, which inland wetlands approved, and the homeowners asked for reconsideration of the inland wetlands decision, and that has not been heard as yet.
I think, Dwight, did that come up at inland wetlands?
Yeah, all it did, what it did was it was just, it was the high jump, and it was just the pits for the high jump. The pits of the high jump are not in the field area. They're off the field. They're next to the track. They're not anywhere near where the is going.
So inland wetlands,
And the inland wetlands approved it because there really weren't any issues where they were talking about.
okay. And they didn't bring up the discussion about the turf field
Well-
materials?
Well, yeah, they did. Remember, I mentioned it and they
Okay,
had to take it up.
that's right, okay.
But then the
Now I-
consensus was, we're not going to touch it. It's already been approved. It's a
Okay,
our issue.
got it, okay. Anyone else have any comments on this? I just thought it would be important for you all to know that I'm hearing from, and you read, I hope, the last 2 emails that came in from Chandra Prasad today. And I can continue to forward them to you, but at Jerry's recommendation, and we really aren't gonna do anything further unless someone feels differently.
I mean, it's a very, very sticky situation because there are health impacts of using these substances. And that has been documented. I don't understand why the school would go ahead with this if the health impacts were as severe as is being claimed. I know that the substance has been used in, many other schools. It's been used at Yale, even though some of the initial complainants were actually, on the faculty at Yale.
Mhm.
And I don't know how we could better arbitrate this situation. I mean, that's where I have the issue. I'm not sure, is it that we're for or against it? I mean, it's not our decision to make.
Right.
So even if we are against them doing it, how do we prevent it? It's not ours to, our decision to enter into. It's very confusing, basically.
Right.
Correct, and I think what they want, Sandy, what you said is absolutely correct. I think there are both sides, there's a discussion, there's opinions on both sides. Some say it's not that horrible, other people say it's, other sides say it's horrible, and they have documentation to back up their position. I think they want the town to seek an injunction to prevent this thing from going forward, or some kind of cause of action against the Board of Education from going forward. I think that that claim is something that they have to do on their own. I don't think this is a town issue, a town of Woodbridge issue, especially after the referendum is already passed and it wasn't brought up prior to the vote, as far as I know.
I mean, I feel like the parents need to appeal to the school and the other parents to change the material that they're going to use. Now, it may mean that they have to go back and get some more money to do that. And, but I don't know what other recourse there is.
Yeah, when this came up after the referendum, and if you recall, I sent all the letters that I was getting out to you guys. I did write a letter to the Amity Board of Education as a citizen, suggesting that they consider looking at another, looking at an alternative material.
Mhm.
And it was presented at the Board of Education meeting, but I don't think they acted upon it. I mean, it was a suggestion, so from one person.
Okay.
And I felt that would be something to just think about at least.
Mhm.
And I don't think that the Board of Ed considered it. I could be wrong, but I didn't see harm in looking at a different material, at least getting a cost estimate, but
Right.
I so anyway, but I just thought it was important because we're continuing to get these emails every once in a while, and I will send them out to you, but in terms of having the town go forward on any of this, we Probably should not, right, Jerry? Correct?
Correct.
Yeah, okay, unless anyone feels
Hey.
differently.
No, I just have a question, Joe. Jerry.
Yes.
The structure, we own the property and we have a lease with the district.
No,
No,
I don't think we have a lease.
No.
No.
they own it.
They own it. We own surrounding property.
We have
But
Bud
the
there. And the park.
Okay, so the district actually owns fee title to that property.
Yes,
Okay. All
that's
right,
that's my understanding.
Yeah, we are in a butter, as is I think the Woodbridge Park Association, if I'm not mistaken, has a budding property. There's a number of them in addition to the households.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else want to comment on that at all? We're all set? Okay, thank you. Anything else under town council's report, Jerry?
No, that's it.
Okay, thank you so much. Item 13 is the acknowledged receipt of the town clerk's report. I will make that motion. They're both in your packet. Is there a second?
second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? That is done. Next is the minutes. Am I right? Yep, okay. First you have in your packet the first set of minutes from the Board of Selectmen regular meeting of May 13th, 2020, which was via WebEx. And I will make a motion that we approve them as presented. Is there a second?
Second, Dwight.
Okay, thank you. Any comments or questions, changes, revisions? Hearing none. I will call the question. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Joe and Joe? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. That's approved unanimously. The next set is the Board of Selectmen special meeting, also by WebEx. And that was regarding the special meeting on May 21st regarding cybersecurity and Amity Woodbridge Historical Agreement. I will make a motion that we approve those. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any additions, corrections, changes on those? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Any opposed? Thank you. That passes unanimously. And we get along to item 15 at 7:16 in the evening. Sorry. We have 3 items for executive session, and I believe, Jerry, it's okay if we go into executive session for all 3?
So long as the same people are going to be irrelevant in all executive sessions.
Would you like me to read, or would someone else like to read the executive sessions? Who would like to do that? Make a motion to go into. Okay, thank you, Joe. Item A is pursuant to section 1-206C, update on cybersecurity. Item B is pursuant to section 1-206E and 1-210B1 to discuss agreement with the Amity Woodbridge Historical Society. And item C is pursuant to section 1-206B, discussion of Penny Lane tax appeal. And I would invite into all 3 Jerry Weiner, Tony Genovese, and Betsy Yagla. And Joe motioned.
And I would just like to say on item B, as Joe Dye appropriately pointed out at the last meeting, we're going into executive session to discuss a draft agreement with regard to the Historical Society, and that's section 1-210B1, and the public interest in withholding the document in withholding such documents clearly outweighs the public interest in disclosure. So, record, and when you vote, you'll be certifying to that effect.
Thank you. So we have a motion from Joe Crisco. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? And now we will ask Betsy Yagler to turn off public, I guess, right? However you do what you do, and let us know when we're good to go, please.
Did we approve that vote?
We can vote.
Oh, did I call it?
No.
All right, thank
No.
you, Joe. Good. Okay, it was so long. Joe Crisco made the motion, Sandy seconded it. Everyone who is in favor with those 3 people and
Aye.
Jerry's. Okay, please.
Aye.
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 Thank you. Any opposed? Was unanimous. Thank you, Joe Dye. Betsy, just let us know when we're out.